Good evening all, and welcome. Today's video has been graciously sponsored by The Rich Wallet. They were very kind to send me one of these beauties, and even though it's not a word I typically use to define a wallet, its elegance and simplicity really speaks for itself. For too long have I been hefting around my thick leather wallet, and now that I have the Rich Wallet, it's changed the feel of my pocket completely. I guess I never really noticed how bulky and in the way it was until now. It's great, all you do is just slot your cards in and put your cash in your money strap. It's literally changed my life. And that's it, you're all set. There's no need for anything else. It's super durable and comes with a lifetime guarantee. So, if you're interested in getting one of your very own, or for someone else, be sure to punch in the promo code MORTIS for 10% off. The link can be found in the description. So go on, liberate your pockets today. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I live about a 5-minute walk away from a train station, and I work one stop away, about a 5-minute walk from that train station. It makes economic and environmental sense for me to get the train to and from work rather than drive, so that's what I do. One morning at about 8:30 a.m., I was walking to work out of the station I arrive into, and a man walking in line with me about a meter away started waving at me. I had my AirPods in, so I didn't actually notice he was trying to get my attention for a while, but eventually I took them out, expecting him to tell me my lace was undone or that I had something in my hair. Instead, he simply said hello and proceeded to try and initiate a conversation. He asked how my morning was going, for my name, and told me my name was Beautiful, and then asked if I had a boyfriend. I don't have a boyfriend, but in this instance I told him I did to try and close the conversation, which didn't work. He proceeded to walk with me all the way to my place of work and carried on walking straight up. This is not uncommon, as I work in a popular business district with lots of offices, so I assumed he just worked further up than me. It was the sort of situation where you tell your friends about the creepy guy on the way to work, but I quickly forgot about it and moved on. A week later, I'm walking back from work to the station, ready to get the train home, and annoyingly, all of the trains are cancelled that evening, for some reason. This is an inconvenience, but because I only live a stop away, I can quite easily get a lift home. I call my mum and she agrees to pick me up once she finishes shopping in around an hour. No biggie. Because all the trains have been cancelled, the station is incredibly busy. There are at least 100 people inside, standing and just sitting around waiting. Luckily, as soon as I walked in, I found a spare seat and sat down, but it was the sort of busy where every seat was taken. I put my AirPods in and just listened to music, wanting to get the ride in an hour. After around 5 minutes of being sat, the person next to me gets up, and another person comes to sit down. I don't even look up from my phone because people are bustling around everywhere. After another 2 or 3 minutes, I feel a tap on my shoulder, and lo and behold, it's the guy from last week. He has chosen to sit right next to me. I fake an uneasy smile, and we chat bluntly for about a minute before I put my headphones back in and close him off. The whole time I'm looking down at my phone and he's shamelessly staring right at me, which makes me feel quite uneasy. After around 40 minutes, he taps me again and asks me how I'm getting home. I tell him my lift will be here any minute and stand up to go and wait outside for my mum, as she had texted me that she was around the corner. The man stands up and says, "Oh, okay, good. I guess I'll go get in my taxi then." At this point, I'm like, what? Why is he waiting here all this time for a train then? "Oh, you're not waiting around," I say to him. and he straight up turned to me and said, "No, I'm getting a cab. I was just waiting to make sure you got home safe," with the creepiest smile, as if he expected me to be grateful for it. I noped my way out of there ASAP, and luckily my mum had just pulled me up to take me home. I'm telling her the whole story of this absolute weirdo, and as I'm telling her I get a notification on my phone. I look down and my blood ran cold. He had just sent me a friend request on Facebook. I had only told him my first name, and even then my name on Facebook is one letter different to my name I gave him. My place of work isn't listed on my profile, so he couldn't have been able to find me from that. And even so, why would you add my personal Facebook account? I haven't actually seen him since then, and I'm so glad that I haven't. I'm hyper aware on my morning commute now and constantly looking out for him. So, that's my creepy train stalker story, and I really hope not to meet him again. This happened a little before my 20th birthday, about 4 to 5 months ago. It was about 5 p.m. and I was waiting for a friend at a bar, and he was running a little late. So I went ahead and got my first drink while waiting. As I was sitting at the bar, a guy came up and started talking to me. Definitely nothing to worry about yet. It was a bar and he definitely seemed like he was just trying to pick me up. We had a light conversation and he offered to buy me a drink, and I accepted. He called the bartender and I ordered. We spoke for a little, exchanged numbers, and I told him I was waiting for a friend, and he asked if she was as pretty and unique as me. Being an alternative girl, guys never really know how to compliment. I laughed and said no. He is definitely prettier, and with almost perfect timing, my friend messaged me that he was there but couldn't see me. I told him I was sitting in the end corner of the bar, and he came to find me. I gave my friend a hug and introduced the two. The guy started to act a little strange now, saying that he didn't want to interrupt our night and being kind of standoffish. He said he had to go and just up and left. I wondered if maybe he was intimidated by my friend because he's 6'4" but is also lanky. I had his number and thought I'd message him tomorrow. I had a nice night with my friend. We had some drinks and then went to get a few more drinks. About 11ish, it was time to say goodbye, and we walked to the train station because we live in different areas and took different trains. His showed up before mine. We said our final goodbyes and I waved him off. I had another 10 or so minutes before grabbing my own train, so I just took out my phone and browsed my socials. This is when I got the feeling that I was being watched. I look around and see no one looking at me, and since I was in the city, even though it was kind of late, people were still about. So I went back to my browsing and had someone sit down next to me. "Thought it was you," the voice said. I looked up and was surprised to see the guy from the bar. I asked if he was also heading home, and he said he was, and that he needed to feed his cat. As a cat person, I asked more about that, and he showed me pictures. He asked if I wanted to come home and feed and see her too. I told him maybe some other time, and he was pretty insistent, but I still refused. My train was coming and I stood to go wait for it. As I was about to turn and say goodbye, he was standing as well. He said he was taking the same train, and at this point I was a little suspicious. But it was a main train, so we got on and I sat down again, and he sat next to me. I had to get off in 2 stops, then get on another train for another 2 stops. And he got off also at the same stop, and on the same train again. The whole time having normal conversations with me. Obviously I was freaking out a little, so I messaged my housemate and asked him to wait for me at the station. Luckily him and his missus were still up, and he asked me why, and I told him to just do it. When we got off at the station that was only a short walk from my apartment, I said it was a funny coincidence that he also lived around here. He turned to me and said, "No, you're taking me to your place." I apologized if he had misunderstood me, but I never had said anything like that. He said that he was already all this way and that I should just let him come over, like he was ordering me around. It all felt gross. At this point, I was in full-on panic mode. There weren't that many people at this stop, and we were in a suburban neighborhood now. This is probably when I looked noticeably panicked, and my housemate saw this and came out of the car. He's 29 and quite a big guy. He came over and in his Lebo accent asked if there was a problem, and the guy said that he was my date and that I was taking him home. I said that was a lie, and my housemate just walked me to the car, and I mean mugged the guy the whole time. Sitting in the car, I got a text. It said, "I'll see you again." I had totally forgotten that I gave him my number. I looked up to see him still standing at the station. We locked eyes, and he smiled and waved. It wasn't a creepy smile. It looked nice and genuine, and I think that is what made it creepier. I avoid that bar now, and would rather not see him again. This happened over a year ago now, when I was 17. I quite often get the train into London to visit my boyfriend. I go up on the Friday or Saturday and come back Sunday evening. My parents always told me, and quite rightly, to try and get an early train home on Sunday, in order to avoid travelling late by myself, but me being naive and stupid, always accidentally missed the earlier trains, in order to spend time with my boyfriend. This particular Sunday, I was getting a train that got into the station where I lived at around 9 p.m. My station is the last stop on the line, and where the train terminates, so by the end of the journey, it is always relatively empty. Sometimes I'm the only one getting off aside from the guard. Usually I would just put in noise-cancelling headphones, settle down and zone out of whatever was happening around me. I'm quite an anxious traveller, so blocking out the sound helps me relax. I also try and sit at the end of a carriage where there aren't as many people, as having lots of people around can make me more susceptible to anxiety attacks. After this evening, I always made sure to sit near people. I'm sitting with my headphones on, tucked away with my suitcase in the footwell of the seat next to me, and a pair of seats next to a window sitting in the window seat, when I notice a man stumble into the seats adjacent to mine across the aisle. He leans across the seats, looks directly at me, and mumbles something to me. He was wearing all black, a massive black coat, and had a big duffel bag. I'm a little anxious because I'm not the biggest fan of talking to strangers. I take off my headphones and politely ask him to repeat himself. His speech is slurred, making what he is saying completely incoherent, but after he's repeating himself several times, I realize he's asking if I know if there are any taxi companies at my station. I say no, sorry, and put my headphones back in. He leans over again and asks me the same question. I take my headphones off and give him the same reply. No, I don't know of any. Sorry. He says something else. I ask him to repeat himself because his speech is so slurred I can't understand him. This strange conversation persists for about 20 minutes. I can't understand much of what he is saying. He is sort of half mumbling, half speaking, and he's not really making much sense. He keeps asking me how I'm getting home and where I live. I just say by car and don't say anything about where I live. I'm super nervous now because this guy just gave me the creeps. I had a feeling something bad was going to happen, and he's starting to make me feel uncomfortable. There was just this vibe about him that he was bad news. He then asks me if I'm going to call the police on him, and I say no. and he starts mumbling and swearing profusely, saying something about beating my brains in, and at this point I'm really starting to freak out. All of a sudden he moves across the aisle to sit in the seat next to mine, trapping me in my seat. I can't escape. I'm sitting next to the window and he's completely blocking the aisle. I'd have to awkwardly climb over him in order to leave. I've decided he must be high or drunk, because his eyes look absolutely crazed and his speech is so slurred. He tells me that I'm very beautiful and asks if I have a boyfriend, moving closer until I could feel his breath on my face. I look around to see if there's anyone in the carriage with me, but I can't see anyone. He leans in really close, and I'm freaking out now. But luckily the train guard comes through from the next carriage, sees me looking very scared and comes over to ask if everything's okay. Immediately this guy's demeanor changes. He leans away from me, and he waves his hand as if to say nothing is wrong. I say yes, everything is okay. But by the look on the face of the guard, he can tell I'm super uncomfortable. The guard makes small talk with the guy and then moves to stand by the door behind us. I don't know what to do. Even though the guard is behind me, I still feel really unsafe, and now I have to get away from this guy. I ask the guy if he would please move back to his seat and say I don't want to talk to him as he's making me feel uncomfortable. He moves back and starts muttering and swearing again, mumbling half-formed threats under his breath. I call my dad, who's picking me up, and when he answers the phone I immediately say, "Hey Dad." The guy looks at me and says, "I'm sorry. I didn't know you had a dad." He tries to talk to me while I'm on the phone. He's talking over me the whole time, but I can't actually make out his words. I have no idea how to try and communicate with my dad that I'm not feeling safe, and this weirdo is talking to me without him overhearing. The train is pulling into the final stop, so I pull my suitcase out of the footwell and try to make a quick exit from the train. The guy gets up very fast and goes in front of me, grabs my suitcase, and takes it off the train, to presumably steal it. I still had my hand on it and managed to pull it back out of his hands. He gets off the train quickly, and I stand next to the guard for a few minutes because I didn't want to get off the train at the exact same time as this guy. The guard asks if I'm alright, and I burst into tears. I'm already anxious and tired, and this may seem like something insignificant, but I suffer with really bad anxiety, and it really creeped me out. A lady comes over. I don't know how she knew I was crying about what happened with this guy, but she must have seen him getting off the train. She says he was asking her about taxis and making her feel uncomfortable until she told him to ask someone else. She apologized for sending him my way, and they both offered to walk me to my car. Luckily, my dad is sitting in the parking lot, and I get in the car safe and sound. There's no sign of where the guy on the train went, and I wish the story would stop there. We make it to a small supermarket on the way home, and usually, my dad would send me in to get whatever we needed, but because I'm still upset from the train, I sit in the car in the deserted parking lot. As soon as my dad enters the supermarket, a car pulls up on the other side of the lot. I see the same guy from the train in the passenger seat, and my blood runs cold. The car he's in isn't a taxi either, which I found strange as that's what he was originally asking me about. I sink down in the car seat a bit, hoping he doesn't see me. But it's like he already knows I'm in the car. He starts pointing at me and talking to the driver. They get out of the car and start walking through the lot towards my car. I immediately lock the doors. My phone is in my bag, which is in the boot, so all I can do is sit there and pray my dad is going to come back at any moment. They've nearly made it to the car when my dad gets back. He was only going in for bread, and they see him, and start walking immediately in the other direction towards the supermarket. I yell at my dad to get in the car. I'm crying so hard, and by the time my dad has got into the driver's seat, the men are nowhere to be seen. I managed to calm down enough to tell my dad between sobs about how the guy from the train was in the parking lot in the car with someone else, and that they were walking towards me. I point at the car they were in, and my dad doesn't say much and just starts driving home. When we get home, and my mum has managed to calm me down a bit, my dad tells me he noticed the same car driving behind us when we left the station, meaning they must have followed us from the station to the supermarket. I felt really embarrassed, like I was overreacting and making a fuss over nothing, because I'm just oversensitive with bad anxiety. When the guy started talking to me on the train, I felt physically sick, and just had this overwhelming feeling that something bad was going to happen. Even though I have anxiety, I don't usually get these feelings just from speaking to a stranger. But come on, this behavior isn't normal, and I'm pretty sure those guys had far darker intentions for me than we originally thought. This happened to me in 2004, but I still get chills thinking about it as I write it. My parents raised me to always pay close attention to my surroundings, and at least on this occasion, I'm pretty sure it saved my life. It was early to mid-February, and I was visiting Boston, Massachusetts, to compete in an annual high school debate tournament. My team was staying at a hotel in Kendall Square near the Charles River. This particular area of Boston, where the hotel was located, wasn't very busy at night, mainly because the hotel was smack in the middle of an area dominated by offices. In fact, aside from the hotel itself, I remember there being nothing else to speak of on the street where this all happened. The tournament was held across the river, a very short subway ride away. Because of the way my day was scheduled, all of my debate rounds were held in different buildings than the rest of my team, and I finished my day later than everyone else. By the time I was finished, the rest of my team was back at the hotel. Having grown up in a big city, I had no problem taking the train by myself, so I caught the subway back to the hotel. I didn't really have any choice in the matter anyway. Now the exit of the subway station was across the street and around half a block down from the hotel entrance, which was set back from the sidewalk by a huge courtyard. It wasn't a very long walk, but in the bitter cold darkness of a winter night, it certainly felt like it was. The sun had already set by the time I got to my stop. I remember noticing how empty the train was, how dark it seemed when I reached the top of the escalator stairs and stepped outside. I always find myself slightly disoriented when I get out of the subway, so I stopped and looked around for the hotel entrance. And that's when I saw him. Almost as soon as I stepped outside, a lone jogger ran past the subway entrance. He was dressed from head to toe in black, including gloves and a ski mask, wearing a black baseball cap on top of the ski mask, which I remember thinking was strange. Aside from the two of us, there was no one else on the street. He passed by me quickly, and being the cautious city boy that I was, I watched him for a moment as he continued down the street. Realizing that the hotel was in the opposite direction, I turned away after a few seconds and crossed the street. I just made it across to the other side of the street when I heard them, coming from behind me, moving incredibly fast. Footsteps. I turned to quickly look over my shoulder. At some point the jogger had turned around, and he was sprinting diagonally towards me from across the street. By the time I saw him, he had crossed most of the street and was maybe 10 feet away. I'm not ashamed to admit that the fight or flight response took over, and I immediately noped out of there, taking off running for the hotel as fast as I could. A while back, I read that looking over your shoulder as you run slows you down. Even though I could still hear his footsteps behind me, I didn't dare to see where he was. I just ran as fast and as hard as I could. down the street and through the hotel courtyard. I was still sprinting when I hit the revolving doors, and it was only when the door swung into the lobby that I looked behind me again. The courtyard was empty. I don't know at that point if he stopped chasing me, but I do know that no one takes a diagonal beeline sprint towards a young stranger across an empty street at night unless they mean to do you some kind of harm. Thankfully, I never found out what his intentions were. For all I know, it could have just been a straightforward mugging. But since 2004, over 20 young men have been found drowned in Boston's underways under bizarre circumstances. Sometimes, when I think back on the jogger ski mask and baseball cap obscuring his face, his arms pumping as he ran at me, I wonder if I almost became one of them. This happened to me about 3 years ago. I was around 15 and have lived in New York City for my entire life, and I like to think that I can handle myself in any situation because I'd seen it all. It was a Friday night, and I was meeting my friend for a 9 o'clock showing of some movie near Times Square. The subway we were on was only half full. I was sitting on the 6 train heading up to Times Square. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, which wasn't very revealing at all. No makeup, and my hair was kind of a mess, because I figured I was just going to sit in a dark movie theater for a few hours with one of my best friends, and I didn't really care what other people thought. I was on my phone with my earbuds in, and I noticed a guy across from me just staring at me with this blank expression on his face. I made eye contact with him, smiled politely and looked back at my phone, because I was sitting right across from him, and I thought he must have just zoned out. 5 minutes later I looked back, and he was still staring at me, this time smiling a frankly creepy smile. I smiled again, politely, and looked back at my phone, hoping he got the hint and stopped staring at me. 2 stops passed, and he was still staring. Finally, the man stood up, and I calmed down a bit. By now, the train had gotten pretty crowded since we were approaching Times Square, and there were people in front of me blocking the man from view. Next thing I know, however, the man was standing directly in front of me, with the hand on the pole above me. I was getting pretty paranoid at this point, but the man was on his phone and I thought I was just exaggerating the situation and that I shouldn't overreact. My stop came. I excused myself, pushed past the man without looking at him, and shoved my way through the doors. Even though I thought it was nothing at this point, I was still freaked out at the proximity of this man and his creepy gaze, and something just felt very wrong about the whole situation, so I booked it out of the subway car. I thought I heard a wait behind me, but I ignored it because it could have been anybody and kept speed walking. The 42nd Street station is pretty big and complicated, and usually very well crowded. I considered it lucky it wasn't very crowded that day, and as I was a pretty skinny girl and very used to dodging tourists in large crowds since I live in a very popular touristy area, I started weaving through the massive crowd faster than I had before. I stepped onto the first escalator, a bit less nervous, and pulled out my phone when a man walked up to me and stopped on the stair directly behind me. He was so close that I could feel him breathing down my neck, and I glanced behind me to see it was the same man from the subway. He had managed to catch up with me. I have no idea, but that was when I really started to freak out. At the top of the escalator, I broke into the fastest walk I've ever walked, trying to get out of there as fast as I could, without looking too distressed. I made it up a few flights of stairs and out of the huge mob of people and started to calm down, thinking again that I was definitely overreacting and that I should just calm down because it was probably nothing. Soon enough, I found a small back exit that consisted of only one turnstile and nearly no tourists, and for some reason I thought that was the perfect place to go instead of somewhere where I would be protected by tons of people. As I was starting to walk up the stairs, I laughed at myself for overreacting at the man just looking at me on a packed subway, and someone grabbed my arm very tightly. I froze halfway up the stairs and whipped around. It was the man panting, squeezing my bicep like his life was depending on it. I was too shocked to say anything, and just stared him down. "Hey," he said eventually, not taking my obvious fears into consideration. "You're very beautiful." "Thanks," I managed to say eventually, and tried to rip my arm from his grip, but he held on tighter. At this point I was starting to panic. I looked around and found that because I'd chosen the quieter exit, it led to a pretty empty side street, and there were only a few people walking around. "Can I have your number?" Keep in mind that this man looks around 35 with a greying beard and nice business clothes on, while I wasn't short or young looking. I was very obviously a teenage girl. I stared at him. "No." I wrenched my arm from his grip and started to walk up the stairs again, trying to stay calm. The man kept following me, and when I made it to the top step, he grabbed me again. "Come on, sweetie, why not? You're so pretty." I said thanks again, because I guess I was just too polite not to, but firmly shook my head and told him, "No, you can't." "Why not?" he asked. "Because I'm 15. This was my attempt to give the man the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he thought I was 20-something and genuinely just wanted to give me his number, right? Instead, the man smiled a wider smile, his grip tightening. "So? That's illegal." "So? So no." I was thoroughly terrified at this point, and I pushed him off me and bolted out of there down towards the more populated area. Behind me, this man was shouting at me to come back, and that we could have a good time. But I just kept on running, and eventually lost him in the thick crowds of Times Square. Once or twice I looked back, and the first few times I noticed his head popping up and down as he tried to shove past tourists. But I eventually lost him in the crowd. I made it safely to the movie, but took a huge detour to get there, so that I could stay in the streets crowded with people. Once there, I took the time to roll my sleeves up and noticed the man had squeezed my arm so hard he had left light bruises on my bicep. I don't think that man's intentions were innocent, or what he was thinking chasing a clearly terrified young girl out of a subway. But I hope to never meet him or anyone like him again. This happened several years back, but it still gets to me. I'm an American living in France. At the time of this incident, I was working in a hotel kitchen for a 5-star hotel. I had to drive 30 minutes, catch a 30-minute metro, and then walk another 10 to get to and from this hotel. I'd work from 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day, and the boss was horrible. The customers were uppity people who thought 5-star meant that the staff are not human. Basically, it was the worst. One day I was having a particularly bad shift. My hair was gross, my face was numb from smiling at rude customers, and all I wanted was to go home, take a shower, and sleep. So I put my earphones in and waited for the metro. At this stop, it was super busy, so the metro opened from both doors, letting people get on one side and off the other. The rest of the stops weren't as busy, so they only opened in the opposite side so people could get out. When the metro arrived, I stepped on and stood next to the door that wouldn't open again, knowing I could lean back for the rest of the trip. Then a man in an electric wheelchair rolled on, and he just stopped in front of the same doors as I was planning to lean against. He had a few bags hanging from the back of his chair, and they weren't pulled up enough so the door would shut on his bags. I knew the doors would close and remain closed, so instead of just telling him to pull them up a bit, I held the bags forward so that they wouldn't get caught in the door. The door closed, I let go, and the guy smiled at me. Then he started speaking to me. I had my earphones in, so I couldn't hear what he said. I was exhausted, but I'm a nice person, so I took them out and started talking to him. He clearly had a disability, as his speech was pretty hard to understand. My French isn't bad, but it wasn't good enough to understand him. "Sorry," I told him, "I don't speak French." And he immediately switched to English. It was a normal conversation. Where are you from? What are you doing? How long have you been here? You're beautiful. Are you getting off at this place? I was getting a little weirded out, but I said, "No, I'm getting off elsewhere," which is one stop before where he said. He said, "Get off at this place with me. You can come over and we can hang out." I politely declined and he said, "Kiss me." Screw it, I thought. I said no and put my earphones back in, ignoring him. He kept talking, but I couldn't hear him, and I was blatantly ignoring him. Then he pushed a loud buzzer on his chair to get my attention. Everyone was looking at us now, and I would have looked terrible if I'd have kept ignoring him. So I pulled my earphone out and he kept trying to talk to me, asking if I had a boyfriend, if I wanted to be his girlfriend, if I would kiss him. Keep in mind, I'm like 20 at this point, and he's a solid 50. Finally, my stop arrives, I say goodbye, and he rolls out the metro with me. I told him that this isn't his stop, and he said that he was coming home with me. I was thoroughly creeped out, but I figured I could ditch him easily at this point. We were 2 floors underground, and I could easily run up those stairs before he could get the elevator. Feeling like a complete douche for trying to ditch a disabled guy, I stick to my plan, sprinting up the stairs, tripping a few times as I did so, mind you, and get to the ground floor and walk outside, satisfied that he is gone. As I'm walking to my car, I hear that buzz. He's behind me, zooming pretty fast after me, and I start running, terrified of this dude who won't leave me alone. I get to my car, and I'm so freaked out that my hands are shaking, and I'm having trouble getting the keys into the car. Finally, I do. I hop in, put it in reverse, and when I check the mirrors, there he is, parked behind my car and buzzing at me. I don't know what to do at this point. I can't reverse and run him over. I'm certainly not going to get out and talk to him, but I have to get home, so I can't just sit there all day. This standoff lasts for about 10 minutes, before he finally just rolls away, glaring at me as he does so. I peel out there and drive home, shaken but satisfied that I'd seen the last of that guy. The next morning, as I pull into the parking lot, still sleepy but ready for work, I get out of the car, get down to the metro, and there he is, waiting on the platform. I'd forgotten that the day before, I told him I worked every day from 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. He knew I'd be there, and he knew when. He smiled when he saw me and began rolling over. I book it back up the stairs, calling my boss on the way, telling him I'm going to be late to work, and ended up just driving into the city, wasting gas and spending a ton of money on parking. I haven't seen him since, and I've since started going to a different metro station. There are few other stations I can park at, and they're sketchy as hell. But this guy has very limited movement, so I know there's probably nothing he could have done to hurt me. And he was probably just a lonely guy who wanted someone to talk to, but still. Now I panic every time I see a wheelchair. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Listening to these, reading these stories reminded me of some of my experiences riding trains. When I was younger, I never, ever rode trains, not even alone. There was just no need for me to take the train. It wasn't that close to my house anyway. But when I moved to university, that's when I really had to start learning how to use the London train system. And that was a challenge. There was one time I got lost. I took the wrong train, and another train wouldn't be coming for half hour, so I was just stuck in this platform, and it wasn't a fun time. But there have been several times when I've been on trains coming home where you've got dodgy people getting on, loud groups of guys who make a ruckus and who go around trying to be intimidating. And it works, because a group of 8 guys who were just out to creep you out, make loud noises, and just be like the big deal, they can certainly be unnerving in the right situation. So some of these stories were definitely relatable and reminded me of times past. Haven't taken the train in a while, to be fair though. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. If you did, be sure to let me know. As always, a huge thank you to my lovely patrons for their amazing and incredible generous contributions. If you'd like to join Patreon for some fancy perks, you can find the link in the description. And if you've got any stories to share of stuff that happened to you on or off trains, you can find the links in the description. But for now, guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.